The emergency meeting room on Luna Station buzzed with tension as alien delegates from across the galaxy gathered in what everyone knew might be their final council session. The massive holographic display showed red zones spreading like a plague across the star map, each crimson marker representing another world that had fallen to the unstoppable Nexari war machine. Ambassador Eula of the Thakari Federation stepped forward, her normally graceful movements jerky with panic. Her species had evolved on peaceful garden worlds where conflict was resolved through meditation and gentle discussion. Now she faced Admiral Kim, humanity's stern-faced military representative, knowing that her entire civilization's survival depended on this conversation. The translator device struggled to convey the desperation in Yellow's voice as she began speaking. Her translucent blue skin flickered with bioluminescent patterns that human xenobiologists had learned indicated extreme emotional distress. Behind her, dozens of other alien representatives watched with the hollow eyes of beings who had already accepted their doom. "Admiral Kim, I must be direct," Yella said, her three-fingered hands clasping together in what humans had learned was a gesture of supplication among her people. "The Nexari Empire has conquered 47 star systems in the past 6 months. They show no mercy to civilian populations. Men, women, children, all are eliminated to make room for Nexari colonies." Captain Lee, monitoring communications from his position near the tactical displays, watched as more distress signals flooded Earth's listening posts. The Nexari advance seemed impossible to stop. They possessed technology that could crack planetary shields like eggs and weapons that turned entire cities to glass in seconds. "Your species was given the Deathworld classification for very good reasons," Yella continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "While the rest of us evolved on worlds of plenty and peace, you humans fought every single day just to survive on that hostile planet you call home. We need that fighting spirit now. We need warriors who understand what it means to never surrender." Admiral Kim remained perfectly still, his weathered face showing no emotion as he absorbed the magnitude of what was being asked. The alien delegates didn't know that hidden sensors throughout the Luna Station were already detecting massive power signatures from the outer solar system. They believed Earth's military consisted of the few dozen patrol ships they'd observed during peaceful trade missions. The truth was far more complex and terrifying. For 20 years, since first contact, humanity had been watching, learning, and preparing. Every peaceful trade delegation had been carefully studied. Every alien technology demonstration had been quietly analyzed and improved upon. While the galaxies celebrated peace and prosperity, Earth's military-industrial complex had been working in absolute secrecy. The Corvan defense fleet lasted 18 hours against them. Yella's voice broke slightly as she continued. The mighty Zenthari Empire, with their 1,000-year military tradition, fell in 3 days. Even the warrior clans of Belgoth were overrun within a week. We have tried everything: combined fleets, defensive alliances, even experimental weapons that violate half the galactic treaties. Nothing works against them. Behind the alien ambassador, Captain Lee's tactical display showed the latest intelligence reports. The Nexari didn't just conquer worlds, they systematically eliminated every trace of the previous inhabitants. Entire species were being wiped from existence with industrial efficiency that would have impressed even humanity's darkest historical periods. "How much time do we have before they reach the core worlds?" Admiral Kim asked, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had faced impossible odds before. Yella's large eyes, adapted for the gentle twilight of her homeworld, seemed to dim with hopelessness. "Our best estimates suggest days, perhaps hours. The Nexari fleet is moving faster than our scouts can track. They seem to grow stronger with each victory, incorporating the technology and resources of conquered worlds into their war machine." The silence that followed stretched like a taut wire. Every alien delegate in the room understood. They were witnessing either the beginning of their salvation or the final moments before galactic civilization ended forever. Admiral Kim's decision would determine the fate of billions of innocent beings across hundreds of worlds. Finally, the human officer gave a single, sharp nod and activated his personal communicator, with a gesture that seemed almost casual, but carried the weight of unleashing forces the galaxy had never imagined possible. The first sign something extraordinary was happening came from the outer edges of the Sol system, where Jupiter's massive bulk had hidden secrets for 2 decades. What every alien species had catalogued as routine gas harvesting platforms suddenly began transforming before their startled eyes. Ambassador Yella stood frozen at the observation deck of Luna Station, watching her species' most advanced sensors struggle to process what they were detecting. The innocent-looking mining operations around Jupiter's moons were revealing themselves to be something far more sinister. Massive docking bays opened like mechanical flowers, releasing sleek warships that had been hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids. "Captain Hannah, are you seeing this?" Yella asked, her aide, whose forearms were dancing across multiple control interfaces as he tried to make sense of the readings flooding their systems. "Ambassador, the energy signatures coming from these installations are off the charts," Hannah replied, his voice tight with disbelief. "These aren't just ships. Some of these vessels are larger than our entire home fleet, and the power readings suggest they've been operational for decades." The transformation spreading across the solar system defied everything the galactic community thought they knew about human capabilities. Saturn's rings, long admired for their natural beauty, began revealing artificial structures that had been perfectly camouflaged among the ice and rock. Massive shipyards unfolded like origami sculptures, their construction bays already filled with vessels that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. Admiral Park's voice cut through every communication channel simultaneously, a feat that should have been impossible with standard galactic technology. "All vessels, this is Terra Command. Operation Guardian Angel is now active. Repeat, Guardian Angel is active. All units report readiness status." The responses that flooded back painted a picture that sent chills through every alien observer. Ship after ship acknowledged orders from positions throughout the solar system. Behind Mars, within the asteroid belt, even in the cold depths beyond Pluto's orbit, humanity had been building and waiting. Captain Su's engineering corps had performed a deception that would be studied for generations. Every innocent asteroid mining operation, every routine cargo hauler, every peaceful research station had been part of an elaborate disguise. While alien diplomats visited Earth's cities and marveled at human art and culture, the real human civilization had been preparing for war on a scale the galaxy couldn't comprehend. "This changes everything," whispered Yola as she watched thousands of human warships begin forming into battle formations. Where galactic intelligence had identified perhaps a dozen patrol vessels, now an armada emerged that rivaled the combined fleets of 50 worlds. The ships themselves looked nothing like the elegant, graceful vessels favored by peaceful galactic civilizations. These were angular, brutal-looking machines built for one purpose: survival in combat. Their hulls bore the scars of extensive testing, and their weapons arrays suggested a species that had spent considerable time thinking about how to efficiently destroy enemies. Captain Hannah's readings revealed another disturbing truth. "Ambassador, these ships aren't newly constructed. The metal fatigue patterns, the wear indicators, some of these vessels have been in service for 15 to 20 years. They've been hiding an entire space navy right under our noses." As the human fleet continued its deployment, alien observers throughout the system began updating their estimates of human military capability. Each revision painted a more terrifying picture. This wasn't just a hidden fleet. It was evidence of a civilization that had never stopped preparing for conflict, even while engaging in peaceful trade and cultural exchange. The most unsettling realization came when the full scope of Operation Guardian Angel became clear. Humanity hadn't just built ships in secret, they had constructed an entire parallel military infrastructure while maintaining the appearance of a modest space civilization focused on exploration and commerce. Ambassador Eula finally understood the terrible mistake her people had made. They hadn't just asked Deathworlders for help, they had awakened something that had been patiently waiting for exactly this moment. The briefing room aboard the human flagship buzzed with uncomfortable tension as alien military observers tried to understand concepts that went against everything they believed about civilized warfare. Captain June stood before a mixed group of delegates from 12 different species, each representing civilizations that had evolved on worlds where cooperation and peaceful resolution were the keys to survival. Let me explain our basic combat doctrine, June began, pulling up holographic displays that showed human battle formations. Every engagement is planned with the assumption that 30% casualties are not just acceptable, but expected. We call this the foundation of strategic planning. The Thakari observer, Kento, shifted uncomfortably in his specialized chair. His species had developed on a world where violent death was virtually unknown, and the concept of deliberately accepting massive losses seemed like madness. Captain, surely you mean 30% casualties would force an immediate retreat and regrouping? Negative, replied Major Nari, her scarred face bearing witness to countless training exercises on Earth's hostile surface. 30% losses mean we're properly engaged with the enemy. We expect to lose people, equipment, and entire ships. The question isn't whether we'll take casualties, it's whether we'll take enough ground to justify them. Around the room, alien delegates exchanged horrified glances. The gentle Villani representative actually began showing signs of physical distress, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Their species had never developed words for concepts like expendable personnel or acceptable attrition rates. Commander Cha decided a practical demonstration might help them understand. He activated the ship's internal systems display and began systematically shutting down critical components. Watch our crew's response, he instructed as alarms began blaring throughout the vessel. What followed defied every principle of alien spacecraft operation. As life support failed in 3 compartments, human crew members simply sealed those sections and continued working. When the primary navigation system crashed, backup operators seamlessly took control without missing a beat. Even when artificial gravity cut out in the starboard sections, personnel there adapted instantly to zero-gravity operations. This is impossible, whispered Kento, as he watched human engineers repair battle damage while the ship continued combat operations. Your people are functioning normally, while half your systems are offline. Any crew from our worlds would be in panic mode, requesting immediate evacuation. Major Nara's explanation cut to the heart of the difference between Deathworlders and everyone else. On Earth, system failures don't mean you get to stop and wait for help. They mean you adapt, or you die. Our children learn to function in toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, and life-threatening situations before they learn to read. The human training regimens shocked the peaceful aliens even more than their casual acceptance of massive casualties. Captain June showed them recordings of routine military exercises where soldiers operated in environments that would kill most galactic species within minutes. Volcanic regions with poisonous gas, Arctic zones with temperatures that could freeze, alien blood solid, and underwater facilities where equipment failure meant certain death. Your training assumes everything will go wrong, asked the Zenthari representative, his proud military bearing somewhat shaken by what he was witnessing. Our training guarantees everything will go wrong, Commander Cha corrected. We break our own equipment, poison our own air supplies, and create impossible scenarios because Earth taught us that impossible is just another word for Tuesday. The alien observers began understanding why their advanced civilizations had crumbled so quickly before the Nexari advance. They had built their entire military philosophy around the assumption that technology would work, that supply lines would hold, and that rational enemies would accept reasonable terms for surrender. Humanity had built their doctrine around the opposite assumption, that everything would fail, that they would be cut off from support, and that enemies would fight to the death. It was the difference between species that had learned warfare from textbooks and a species that had learned it from surviving on a planet, actively trying to kill them every single day. The peaceful aliens finally grasped the terrifying truth. They had never needed to become killers to survive. Humans had never been given that choice. The hyperspace exit point at the edge of the Kepler system erupted with brilliant flashes as the human armada materialized from the void. What Admiral Wan and his fleet witnessed in those first moments would be burned into their memories forever, a scene of systematic genocide, unfolding on an industrial scale that shocked even battle-hardened veterans. The beautiful blue-green world of Valani Prime was dying before their eyes. Massive Nexari dreadnoughts hung in orbit like mechanical vultures, their weapons systematically cracking the planet's crust and boiling away its oceans. But the true horror wasn't the planetary bombardment, it was what the Nexari were doing. To the fleeing civilians, Lieutenant Han's voice cracked as he reported from the communications station. "Admiral, I'm picking up thousands of distress signals from civilian evacuation ships. The Nexari aren't just destroying military targets, they're hunting down refugee vessels one by one." The tactical display painted a picture of calculated cruelty that made Admiral One's jaw clench with barely controlled rage. Nexari interceptor squadrons were systematically tracking down every escape pod, every civilian transport, every hospital ship trying to flee the dying world. They weren't just conquering, they were ensuring total extinction of an entire species. "Commander." Rue watched his sensor displays in growing horror as the true scope of Nexari methodology became clear. "Sir, they're not taking prisoners or accepting surrenders. Every civilian vessel that tries to surrender is being destroyed anyway. This isn't warfare, it's extermination." The Nexari commander's voice suddenly filled all communication channels, speaking in heavily accented, but perfectly understandable galactic standard. His tone carried the casual arrogance of someone who had never faced serious opposition. "Unknown vessels, you have arrived just in time to witness the completion of the Valani cleansing. Your species files indicate you are the primitive Deathworlders from Sol System. How amusing that you think your handful of ships can change anything." Captain Bay's bridge crew could hear actual laughter in the transmission, a sound that sent chills through even the most experienced human officers. The Nexari weren't just confident, they were enjoying this. 3 billion sentient beings were dying, and their killers found it entertaining. "Admiral, should we attempt to establish diplomatic contact?" asked Lieutenant Han, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Admiral One's response came without hesitation. "Negative. Patch me through to all fleet channels." His voice carried the cold authority of someone who had just witnessed something unforgivable. "All vessels, this is Admiral Wan. What we're seeing here ends now. Operation codes are weapons-free, maximum aggression, no quarter given to any Nexari vessel." The Nexari commander's amusement grew as he detected the approaching human fleet. His species had faced this scenario countless times, a smaller force arriving to play hero, only to surrender or flee when confronted with overwhelming Nexari firepower. "Little Deathworlders, you are outnumbered 3-1. Submit now, and we will make your deaths swift." Captain Bay's response transmitted across every frequency in the system, his words carrying the weight of a species that had never learned to back down. "This is Captain Bay of the Earth Defense Force. You have 10 seconds to cease all hostile actions and withdraw from this system, or we will interpret your presence as an act of war against humanity and respond accordingly." The silence that followed stretched for exactly 10 seconds. Then, instead of the expected surrender or retreat that had characterized every other species' response to Nexari ultimatums, something unprecedented happened. The human vessels opened fire. Commander Ru's destroyer squadron engaged the nearest Nexari formation without hesitation, their weapon systems lighting up space with deadly precision. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the humans showed no signs of fear or tactical withdrawal. Instead, they attacked with a ferocity that caught the Nexari completely off guard. The Nexari commander's laughter died in his throat as he realized these Deathworlders were actually fighting back and winning. Supreme War Leader Thex stood in the command center of his flagship, staring at tactical displays that showed something his 3-century military career had never prepared him for. The floating holographs painted a picture that violated every principle of civilized warfare. His species had developed over millennia of conquest. His tactical officer's voice carried a tremor that Dex had never heard before. War Leader, the human vessel designated Earth 7 has lost all primary systems. Hull breaches on 12 decks, life support completely offline, main engines destroyed. According to all tactical models, they should be requesting immediate evacuation. Dex leaned forward, his scaled hands gripping the command rail as he watched the supposedly crippled human ship adjust its trajectory. Instead of drifting helplessly or broadcasting surrender codes, the dying vessel was accelerating directly toward his prized battleship, the Dominator. "What are they doing?" he whispered, though part of him already knew the answer and refused to accept it. The Nexari Empire had built their military doctrine around a simple truth that had worked against every species they'd encountered. When faced with certain death, rational beings choose survival over meaningless sacrifice. Every conquered civilization had eventually reached the point where continued resistance became mathematically impossible, and their leaders had made the logical choice to surrender rather than face extinction. These humans were rewriting that fundamental rule. Captain Jin's cruiser squadron provided another example that defied all tactical understanding. His ships had taken damage that should have forced immediate withdrawal from the battle zone. Weapon systems offline, armor plating stripped away by Nexari plasma cannons, internal explosions visible through massive hull breaches, yet they continued advancing and firing with whatever systems remained functional. War Leader, we're receiving unprecedented casualty reports from all forward positions, another officer announced, his voice tight with disbelief. The humans are fighting more effectively as they take damage, not less. Our psychological warfare division cannot explain this behavior pattern. Vex watched Commander Min's destroyer execute what should have been impossible. The vessel had been reduced to little more than a flying wreck, its hull split open to space, its crew operating in vacuum-sealed emergency compartments. By every measure of military logic, it was a dead ship that simply hadn't stopped moving yet. But instead of accepting defeat, the human crew had somehow managed to aim their dying ship at the Nexari heavy cruiser Shadowbane and activate their remaining propulsion systems. The collision that followed vaporized both vessels in a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire battlefield. "They're using their own ships as weapons," Vex said aloud, his voice carrying a note of something he hadn't felt in decades: uncertainty. How do you fight an enemy that treats their most valuable assets as expendable ammunition? The answer came from his intelligence officer, who had been frantically analyzing human communication intercepts. "War Leader, our translation systems have been monitoring their tactical channels. We cannot find any equivalent in their language for what other species call tactical withdrawal or strategic surrender. The closest translation appears to be fighting retreat, which still involves continued combat." This revelation sent a chill through the Nexari command staff that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. They were facing an enemy that literally could not comprehend the concept of giving up. Every other species had a breaking point where self-preservation overcame military objectives. Humans appeared to have evolved without this basic survival instinct. "War Leader," his tactical officer continued, his professional composure finally cracking, "our forward commanders are reporting something impossible. Human vessels that should be combat ineffective are continuing to fight. Some are operating with over 70% system failures and still maintaining offensive capabilities. Vex realized with growing horror that his century of easy victories had taught him nothing about fighting a species that treated death as just another tactical consideration. The Nexori had never needed to develop strategies for enemies, who got more dangerous as they got more desperate. For the first time in his long military career, Supreme War Leader Vex began to understand what his countless victims had felt in their final moments, the cold touch of genuine fear. The liberation of the Thakari mining colony on Kepler 438b became a textbook example of why evolutionary history matters more than advanced technology. Colonel Yu watched through his helmet display as Nexari forces struggled to maintain combat effectiveness in an environment that barely registered as challenging to his human troops. The planet's atmosphere contained sulfur compounds that would burn the lungs of most galactic species within minutes, while the gravity was nearly twice Earth normal. For the Nexari, fighting here required bulky environmental suits that restricted movement and limited combat duration to mere hours before requiring atmospheric processing breaks. Sir, the enemy is requesting a 6-hour combat pause for environmental suit maintenance, reported Sergeant Kim, barely suppressing his amusement as he monitored Nexari communications. They're saying the atmospheric conditions are beyond their operational parameters. Colonel Yu breathed the planet's toxic air through his standard-issue filter mask and felt perfectly comfortable. His troops had been fighting continuously for 18 hours without any environmental protection beyond basic respiratory filters. To them, Kepler 438b felt like a mild spring day. Compared to some of Earth's more challenging training environments, Captain Gang's Marine Battalion demonstrated another crucial advantage as they moved through the colony's industrial sectors. The Nexari had expected standard military formations and predictable assault patterns based on galactic warfare textbooks. Instead, they faced something that operated on pure hunting instinct, refined over millions of years of evolution. The human Marines didn't need radio communication to coordinate their attacks. They moved like a pack of wolves, each soldier instinctively knowing where their teammates would be and what they would do next. When Gang's second squad encountered heavy resistance in the main processing plant, they seamlessly split into 3 groups that flanked, distracted, and eliminated the enemy position without exchanging a single tactical communication. How are they coordinating without communications? Demanded Nexari Field Commander Vec as he watched his carefully planned defensive positions crumble. Our sensors detect no tactical transmissions between their units, yet they're operating with perfect synchronization. The answer lay in evolutionary psychology that no military academy in the galaxy taught. Humans had evolved from persistence, hunters who worked in coordinated groups to bring down prey much larger and more dangerous than themselves. Their tactical instincts were literally hardwired into their DNA. Through millions of years of cooperative hunting, Major Hong's platoon showcased the biological advantages that made human soldiers nearly impossible to stop once they committed to an objective. During the assault on the colony's command center, Hong took a direct hit from a Nexari plasma rifle that would have killed any other known species instantly. The energy blast burned through his armor and damaged several internal organs. Instead of falling or calling for medical evacuation, Hong continued leading his troops while his body's redundant organ systems compensated for the damage. His backup kidney filtered toxins, while his secondary liver processed the biochemical shock. Even with internal bleeding and severe burns, he maintained full combat effectiveness for another 4 hours until the objective was secured. Impossible, whispered Nexari Medical Officer Tall, as he examined recordings of the battle. The human suffered injuries that should have resulted in immediate system failure and death. Yet he continued fighting as if nothing had happened. Admiral Ko's briefing to the Allied command staff explained what the rest of the galaxy was slowly beginning to understand. Gentlemen, every species in this room evolved on worlds that supported life. Your planets nurtured you, provided for you, and taught you to work together for mutual survival." He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "Earth tried to kill humanity every single day for 4 million years. Our weather, our predators, our diseases, even our food was constantly trying to end us. We didn't just survive our homeworld, we conquered it so completely that we turned it into a garden and still consider it paradise." The assembled alien commanders shifted uncomfortably as the implications became clear. They were witnessing the military application of evolutionary advantages that no peaceful civilization could match. Humanity hadn't just developed technology and tactics. They had been forged by their environment into the perfect killing machines. The Nexari Empire had spent centuries perfecting strategies to defeat rational, civilized opponents. They had never imagined facing a species that had learned warfare from surviving on a planet, actively trying to exterminate them. Operation Iron Storm began at precisely 0800 Galactic Standard Time, when Admiral One's voice transmitted across every human frequency in known space. What followed was a demonstration of military coordination that left Allied observers struggling to comprehend the true scope of humanity's hidden preparations. The first wave revealed reserve fleets emerging from locations that galactic intelligence had never suspected existed, hidden bases inside comets, hollowed-out asteroids that had been positioned decades ago, and even mobile shipyards that had masqueraded as deep space research stations suddenly activated across 23 different star systems simultaneously. Captain Nam's task force approached Nexari Fortress World Prime with tactics that made even seasoned human veterans uncomfortable. Where galactic military doctrine emphasized surgical strikes and minimal collateral damage, the humans had calculated that total destruction was more efficient than prolonged siege warfare. "Sir, the Nexari fortifications on the northern continent are reporting something impossible," Lieutenant Park announced from his monitoring station. "The human forces aren't trying to capture strategic positions, they're obliterating them completely." The siege that followed redefined what galactic civilization considered acceptable military behavior. Commander Shin's assault troops advanced through defensive kill zones that had been specifically designed to make infantry attacks suicidal. Nexari weapon systems poured devastating fire into corridors where no rational species would dare to advance. But humans weren't rational by galactic standards. They were products of a world that had taught them survival meant accepting terrible losses to achieve necessary objectives. Shin's Marines took casualties that would have broken any other military unit, yet continued their advance with mechanical precision. "They're walking through our primary defensive grid like it's a training exercise," reported Nexari Defender Cole, his voice cracking with panic as he watched human soldiers advance through weapon fire that should have stopped any assault. "Dead. 15% casualty rates, 20%, 25%, and they're still coming." Captain Ray's engineering corps demonstrated why Earth's military philosophy was so terrifying to civilized species. Instead of trying to capture Nexari defensive positions intact, they systematically destroyed every fortification, bunker, and strongpoint they encountered. Their approach was simple and brutal. If the enemy could use it for cover, eliminate it completely. Within 48 hours, fortress worlds that had taken the Nexari Empire decades to construct were reduced to smoking rubble. The aliens watched in horror as humans displayed a talent for destruction that went beyond mere military efficiency. They possessed an instinctive understanding of how to make defensive positions utterly unusable. "They're not conquering our worlds," whispered Nexari Strategic Commander Yex as he watched tactical reports flood in from across the Empire. "They're sterilizing them. Every defensive position, every military installation, every weapon depot, completely eliminated." The human approach horrified their galactic allies almost as much as their enemies. Species that had spent centuries developing rules of civilized warfare found themselves watching Deathworlders who treated total destruction as a routine tactical option. Commander Beyond's assault on the Nexari logistics hub at Sector 7 exemplified this philosophy. Rather than attempting to capture the facility's advanced manufacturing equipment, his forces systematically destroyed every piece of infrastructure that could support future military operations. Storage facilities, manufacturing plants, command centers all reduced to twisted metal and concrete dust. Admiral, our allies are requesting clarification on post-conquest occupation procedures, reported Communications Officer Lee from the Fleet Command Center. Admiral, one's response revealed the fundamental difference between human and galactic military thinking. Tell them there won't be any occupation. These fortress worlds will be uninhabitable for military purposes for the next century. That's the point. The galaxy finally understood why Earth's danger classification had required unanimous council approval to seal. Humans didn't just fight wars. They fought with such complete thoroughness that their enemy's ability to wage future conflicts was permanently eliminated. The Nexari Empire was discovering what it meant to face a species that viewed total warfare not as an extreme measure, but as standard operating procedure. The 3th-century Nexari expansion was ending, not because they faced superior technology or greater numbers, but because they had encountered the one thing their doctrine couldn't handle: an enemy that treated complete destruction as natural survival behavior. The fall of the Nexari Empire happened so quickly that historians would spend decades trying to understand how 3 centuries of galactic dominance could collapse in less than 6 months. The speed of the defeat was matched only by the confusion it created among the conquered, who found themselves facing victors unlike anything in their species' experience. Supreme War Leader Vex sat in the detention facility aboard Admiral Park's flagship, staring at walls that should have been his tomb, but instead resembled a comfortable diplomatic quarter. The human guards treated him with professional courtesy that made no sense according to Nexari understanding of warfare. In his culture, defeated enemies were eliminated to prevent future uprisings. Mercy was seen as dangerous weakness. Admiral Park, I do not understand your species' behavior, Vex said during his first interrogation session. My forces eliminated entire populations on 17 worlds. We showed no mercy to your galactic allies. Why am I still alive? Admiral Park's response revealed a fundamental difference between human and Nexari military philosophy that the defeated war leader couldn't comprehend. Because our victory is measured not by how many enemies we kill, but by how many we prevent from becoming enemies in the future. Executing prisoners creates martyrs and perpetuates cycles of revenge. The concept was so alien to Nexari, thinking that Dex required multiple conversations to even begin grasping it. His species had conquered through fear and absolute dominance, believing that showing any compassion would encourage resistance. The humans were demonstrating that true victory meant changing enemies into allies. Captain O's occupation forces provided living examples of this philosophy as they worked to restore order on former Nexari worlds. Instead of the brutal suppression that conquered populations expected, they witnessed something unprecedented. Warriors, who had just finished destroying military installations, were now distributing medical supplies to civilian populations. Sir, the local population is asking when the executions will begin, reported Lieutenant SEO from the former Nexari Administrative Center on Kepler Prime. They seem confused by our humanitarian aid operations. Their historical records show that conquerors typically eliminate potential troublemakers immediately. The scenes playing out across liberated worlds shocked both former Nexari subjects and galactic observers. Human engineering corps worked alongside alien civilian contractors to rebuild infrastructure that the war had damaged. Medical teams provided treatment to wounded Nexari soldiers and civilians alike, making no distinction between former enemies and victims. Commander Kong's situation reports to Earth Command painted a picture of systematic rehabilitation rather than occupation. Admiral, former Nexari military personnel are requesting assignment to reconstruction duties. They seem genuinely surprised that we're not planning mass executions or forced labor camps. The speed of the transformation amazed even veteran human officers. Worlds that had been fortress strongholds just weeks earlier were becoming functioning civilian colonies again. Former Nexari soldiers, expecting death or slavery, found themselves offered retraining programs and positions in new civilian governments. "This is impossible," whispered former Nexari Admiral Kex, as he watched human supervisors teaching his former subordinates basic democratic governance principles. "Victorious species do not educate their enemies, they eliminate them." Lieutenant Back's psychological warfare unit had anticipated this confusion and developed specific protocols for dealing with it. "Sir, the former Nexari leadership consistently assumes we're implementing some form of delayed punishment or subtle torture. They cannot comprehend that we actually intend to help them rebuild their society." The rehabilitation programs revealed another aspect of human military doctrine that confused everyone involved. Earth's forces hadn't just planned for victory, they had planned for the aftermath. Detailed reconstruction blueprints, civilian aid distribution networks, and political transition protocols had been developed alongside the military campaign. Perhaps most shocking to galactic observers was the efficiency of the transition. The same species that had demonstrated terrifying military capabilities was now showing equally impressive skills at peacekeeping and reconstruction. Former enemies were becoming allies, not through fear or coercion, but through the simple demonstration that humans preferred building to destroying when given the choice. As former Nexari fleets surrendered across 17 star systems, their crews discovered something that defied their understanding of conquest. Victorious enemies who chose rehabilitation over revenge, and who somehow made that choice seem like the natural result of overwhelming strength rather than weakness. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had been rebuilt twice in its thousand-year history, but never had it hosted a gathering quite like this one. Representatives from over 200 civilizations filled the chamber, their conversations creating a symphony of different languages and translation devices that somehow managed to sound hopeful rather than desperate for the first time in decades. Ambassador Yala stood at the observation deck, watching delegates who had once fled in terror, now eagerly seeking audiences with the human representatives. The irony wasn't lost on her. The species her people had contacted as a last resort had become the most sought-after allies in galactic history. Admiral Kim's entrance into the council chamber marked a moment that would be remembered for generations. Unlike the elaborate ceremonial processions favored by other military leaders, he simply walked to his designated seat with the same quiet confidence he'd shown during that first desperate meeting on Luna Station. "Honored delegates," Kim began, his voice carrying easily through the massive chamber without amplification. "1 year ago, you asked Earth for help against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Today, the Nexari Empire exists only in history books, and their former territories are free worlds, choosing their own governments." The applause that followed was unlike anything the council had ever witnessed. Species that had never agreed on anything were united in their gratitude to the Deathworlders, who had saved them all. But Admiral Kim's next words reminded everyone present that humanity's protection came with certain expectations. Earth's fleets now patrol 17 sectors of previously Nexari space, he continued, his tone remaining conversational despite the weight of his words. "We will continue these patrols indefinitely. However, let me be clear to anyone listening. The protection we offer to peaceful civilizations extends to threats from any source." Captain Lee's classified intelligence briefing had been shared only with the Council's senior leadership, but its implications rippled through every conversation in the chamber. The humans had revealed just a fraction of their true military capabilities During the Nexari War, sensor readings from the outer edges of human space suggested defensive installations and fleet concentrations that dwarfed what had already been witnessed. Ambassador, whispered her aide during a brief recess. The energy signatures our scouts detect from the human border regions are unprecedented. If their displayed fleet represents only their expeditionary forces, what must their home defense capabilities look like? Yola had been wondering the same thing, but Admiral Kim's briefing to the senior delegates had provided a chilling answer. Earth's military doctrine operated on the assumption that any threat serious enough to require their full attention would need to be eliminated so completely that it could never threaten galactic peace again. The treaty signings that followed established humanity as the unofficial guardians of galactic civilization. Though Admiral Kim insisted on calling it a mutual defense arrangement, species that had developed no military traditions beyond ceremonial guards now had access to the most effective fighting force the galaxy had ever seen. The interesting thing, observed the Zenthari delegate during the reception, is that they don't seem to want this responsibility. Most species would be demanding tribute or territory in exchange for such protection. Indeed, humanity's reluctance to accept formal authority over galactic affairs had become a source of fascination for political scientists across known space. Earth's representatives consistently deflected attempts to grant them special status or governing authority, preferring to maintain their role as protectors rather than rulers. As the council session concluded, Ambassador Eula found herself reflecting on the transformation her desperate plea had triggered. The galaxy had gained more than military protection. They had discovered that true strength could exist alongside compassion, and that the most effective guardians were often those who never sought power in the first place. The chamber slowly emptied as delegates returned to their homeworlds, carrying news that would reshape galactic civilization. The age of easy conquest was over, not because of superior technology or numbers, but because any future aggressor would have to face the unleashed fleets of a species that had learned warfare from surviving on a planet actively trying to kill them. The galaxy slept peacefully that night, protected by reluctant guardians who had proven that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected sources.